Today we're going to break down everything there is about the Dream Survival multiplayer, basically the server of the biggest and best Minecraft YouTuber of today. The storyline featuring one of cinema's biggest independence events, culminating in the Great War with extensive battles, player versus player, and bloodshed. So get comfortable in your chair and let's go. Before we start, I'd like to clarify that most of the information in this video comes from the Dream Survival multiplayer fandom page as well as videos by Ivan MC Gaming. And now, with the credits properly given, we can begin our adventure. A lot of people don't know what the Dream Survival multiplayer is, and well, it's actually a pretty simple concept. Dream Survival multiplayer is a Minecraft server somewhat like a tabletop role-playing game, though that wasn't the original idea. When the Nether update 1.16 came out, he joined his YouTuber friend George to explore the world. He had created it for fun, and in the first live streams of the adventure, they weren't role-playing at all. They were two good friends exploring the world together, which remains the essence of Ujimato's Minecraft today. The Dream Survival multiplayer became famous because they eventually scripted a medieval story that played out on the server. Although there are many planned elements, not every sentence by the YouTubers is scripted, which is very positive. The Brazilian series The Walking Crafty used the same format, with authentic acting and staged events such as Rezende's kidnapping.
What is this? Who are you? With. Are you the director? I am.
Good times, right? The main difference is that the Dream Survival multiplayer reached unimaginable levels. Additionally, several artists created animated scenes or shorts resembling high-budget films, such as Sadist, which has over 12 million views. With so much visibility, you'd expect a strong story. But is it? What is the Dream Survival multiplayer really about? From now on, I'll narrate the central plot of the story, briefly covering all the main points. It's not possible to explain all the story's characters, especially with over 100 of them. They're all YouTubers or streamers and friends of Dream. That's outside the server, since inside it's all blood and rivalry. One of the events that triggered the rivalry between several members of the server was the first trial. This occurred a few days after the simple server opened to more players, the death of the horse Joffrey. On May 14, 2020, during an early survival multiplayer stream, George stole Sapnap's horse and started riding it around the community house. Annoyed, Sapnap went after George and started punching him. However, this ended up with Sapnap killing his own horse. Upset with the situation, Dream and Bad Boy Hello decided to take the legal route in what would become known as the first court case to happen on the server. At the event, Sapnap, George, Dream, Bad Boy Hello, and Callahan attended. Sapnap started by arguing why he was innocent. He claimed that George stole the horse and that his murder was an unfortunate accident caused by George's actions. George replied that it wasn't his fault because Sapnap was reckless rescuing the horse. In the end, George was sentenced to death by lava for stealing Joffrey. Remember, Sapnap and Callahan also died because of the mischief during the case. This may not seem relevant, but it's a historic milestone for the server, marking the first signs of member rivalry. Things got worse after that. YouTuber Punk, introduced with Bad Boy Halo, was a key figure in historical development. He had a unique habit of planting traps in his friends' buildings and houses. He became even more eager after George burned down his giant tree, which took a long time to build. All these seemingly harmless elements would, in the future, cause the First War. Besides that, however, the most important and crucial player for the story was Tommy. He is so important that all the events that happened before his arrival are called before Tommy. And why is he so relevant? Simple. He came to spread pure and absolute chaos. That was all he wanted. Tommy took it upon himself to divide the server until things were interesting enough for him. He was invited on July 4th and on the same day became a problem, bothering absolutely everyone. He repeatedly killed George and stole a lot. 2 days later, the server's first Great War began. Tommy decided to build his house on a hill too close to Punk's great tree, which had already been rebuilt. Though annoying, Tommy quickly started territorial conflicts. This led to Tommy's murder by Punk and sparked Sapnap's revolt against him since he had set traps throughout his house. Therefore, the great tree was burned for the second time by Sapnap. As revenge, Punk burned his friend's entire house without thinking twice, which was a way over the line. Sapnap teamed up with Tomy to put an end to this conflict, thus the first group was formed. They began a major conflict with Punk, and during the battle, Dream, the server creator, showed up. Very upset with the direction his server had taken, he decided to get involved and was killed by Sapnap. Dream's death was a shock to absolutely all the members up to that point. Within a few hours, everyone was involved in the conflict. Picking sides and fighting, Sapnap and Tomy eliminated anyone in their way until something changed. Something that would change the course of the server forever. Dream stole Tomy's music discs. He had spent hours collecting those items and he wasn't going to let all that time go to waste. Since Tomy and Sapnap were now allies, they devised a plan to retrieve the discs. Tomy would create a distraction while Sapnap searched the server for the treasures. He found a disc, fled from Dream, tossed it to Tomy, who hid it in a ravine and pretended to hide it elsewhere. Very different. To distract Dream, the two allies made a plan while keeping their opponent occupied. They knew Dream had the second disc, so they'd have to kill him. That's why they called Tubbo, Tomy's loyal sidekick from years ago, to help. The plan was to surround Dream and attack with high damage axes. Sapnap and Tomy died. From the start, they brought beds to the ravine where Dream still searched for the lost disc. Then, they started dropping a lot of gravel on top of the enemy and surrounding him. Dream, because he had much better gear, killed Tomy and Sapnap, leaving everything in Tubbo's hands. And with surprising willpower, the newcomer killed the most powerful man on the server and recovered the disc. That's how the server's biggest conflict and maybe Minecraft's began. Since that day until the present, distinct groups have fought relentlessly for possession of the two discs, which pass from hand to hand as a sign of good fortune. The day after Tomy's win over Dream, things began to change. He logged into his favorite server only to discover that all the land around his main base had been completely destroyed by Dream, obsessed with the discs. And yes, the green man found them. He did this because when Tomy hid the discs in a specific location near his base, he accidentally left the game sound on and it leaked during his stream. This let Dream, as the player he is, already know where the discs were, which was a win for him. But the conflicts didn't stop. Dream killed Tomy and Tubbo several times while they were trying to come up with a plan to get the discs back. Dream then suggested a trade. Tomy's netherite chestplate, his most valuable item, in exchange for his stolen treasure. And to make the decision even harder, Dream started taunting his opponents, initiating a tower battle. He played the discs and started moving it up while Tubbo and Tomy also climbed to reach it. After a lot of effort, all of it was in vain. They couldn't do it and decided to accept the deal. However, they still had one last strategy. When Dream dropped the discs and Tomy dropped the chestplate, Tubbo managed to grab the discs and log out. Tomy reclaimed the chestplate while his enemy was distracted and logged out. After many failed tries, they succeeded. Or at least that's what they thought. It was soon revealed that the discs Dream handed over were fake. Modern top players wouldn't be fooled so easily. The next day, Tomy and Tubbo had a plan. They figured the real discs would be in Dream's underground base, but they had no idea where it was. They used an X-ray glitch to see through walls and find the base. The plan worked. Seconds later, they were in Dream's house, but the happiness quickly faded. The discs weren't there, and they saw no other option but to accept the deal. No lies or schemes this time. And that's what happened. They got their discs back. However, Tomy realized something. They had possessed the disc before, but it didn't help. Only an ender chest can keep the trophies safe anywhere on the map. They started negotiations with other players for blaze rods and ender pearls, but Dream found out about the plan. Knowing he'd lose control if they succeeded, he decided to attack them mercilessly. Tomy realized his only way to get obsidian while Dream chased him was to destroy the community nether portal. He embarked on his mission and, after several close calls, finally succeeded in securing his discs. They had finally won the war together as always, and peace lasted 2 weeks. The conflict seemed settled, but a few days later a new player appeared. A storyteller and wordsmith like Tomy, who could change the server's direction entirely. Ladies and gentlemen, I am pleased to introduce you Wilbur Sut. Wilbur is a visionary and was already well known in the Minecraft scene for having implemented several innovative ideas. His main distinguishing feature is creativity. Upon joining, Wilbur immediately met his main partner for this journey, Tomy, winner of the first war, and together they set up a real operation. They would convince the players to donate their blaze rods through promises and deals. And with the rods inside the van they had built, they would make potions, which was considered a crime in the city. Any similarity to Breaking Bad is purely coincidental. Remember, the potions would be highly valued and guarantee resources as the duo were production pioneers. And they would also have a monopoly on potions since no one would be able to compete with their infrastructure. They also had plans to rig the distributions and break their promises after they reached the top. In short, they were two con artists with a brilliant idea. The plan was set in motion when Tubbo, who trusted Tommy, became the first to donate his rods, so the duo collected everyone's rods. Many others agreed after that, except for a sapnap. He saw through Wilbur and Tommy's plans and refused to help. More than that, he stole Tubbo's rods for himself. Sapnap followed Tommy and Wilbur to the van and production center, discovering their plans. Trapped, Wilbur tried to incriminate Sapnap. However, he ended up uncovering their plan as well and threatened to arrest the pair of cheaters. During a heated argument, he ended up taking Tommy's life, adding another to his immense list of deaths. And Tubbo, realizing he had been deceived, sided with Sapnap and separated from his former loyal companion. But Wilbur and Tommy were not alone. Fundy, another player on the server, decided to join the group. But the trio was unarmed and directly faced Sapnap and Tubbo, who were well equipped. With no way out, they ran into the van, but the problems didn't end there, they only got worse. Ponky, who had unfinished business with Tommy involving fraud, basically came to settle the score along with his friend Purpody. The trio was completely cornered and had no way out. They needed to come up with a plan, and preferably fast. Wilbur distracted Ponky and Purpody as Tommy escaped through a hole in the van's floor into a cave. The two noticed and chased him. Then Wilbur argued with Tubbo and Aaron, another guard. He logged out of the server to buy time, knowing the two would wait for him. Ponky and Purpody caught up with Tubbo and he had to surrender. Fundy, who remained in the van, also surrendered and was taken to prison by Tubbo. Now Wilbur's only obstacle was Eret, the other guard waiting in the van. And in the end, however, Eret betrayed his friends and decided to help the cheaters, joining them. They came up with a plan to rescue Fundy, who was still being escorted, and since no one knew that Eret had betrayed the guards, he would ask Tubbo to let him escort Fundy to the prison, and there he would be able to rescue him. And it seemed easy, and in fact it would have been if Purpody hadn't heard everything and immediately informed SEP and EP. And then a series of mishaps happened, including invisibility potions, Ponky attracting the guards, and honestly, what a terrible choice of guards. With Tubbo back on the dark side, all prisoners escaped and a larger alliance began forming. Wilbur, Tubbo, Tommy, Eret, and Fundy would confront Dream when they had enough power, and that power, in turn, would come through a revolution. The quintet was no longer made up of scheming negotiators. Now they were revolutionary citizens who founded a new nation. Lemanburg was the kingdom they formed to separate from the server and begin their plans. They built walls around the van and set an important rule. Any citizen of Lemanburg could brew potions without being arrested, as had happened with the Five. Would Dream's tyranny and Sapnap's violence no longer be tolerated by these revolutionaries? The five names that changed Dream's history and forever joined together there, and they were determined, and nothing could stop them. When he heard about the revolution, Dream tried to convince Tommy to turn against his new kingdom. The server's most powerful man refused to lose his power. While developing Lemanburg, Tommy noticed a strange fire in the surrounding forest. He saw Itzalisa, another player who was on Dream's side, committing the crime. While the team was chasing her, she logged out and they set up a watch pit for when she returned. Wilbur told Tommy to put down his weapons and only use words, as he didn't want Lemanburg to become the violent kingdom he had vowed to destroy. When Itzalisa returned, Tommy killed her despite Wilbur's order. Furious, Wilbur temporarily banished Tommy from the new kingdom. But then Tommy discovered that Sapnap and Dream were holding Tubbo hostage. If there was ever a moment to regain his friend's trust, this was it. He prepared and set out to rescue, but was captured too. Useless, but at least he tried. Dream and Sapnap mercilessly executed their unarmed enemies. When Wilbur heard this, he decided it was the last straw. The revolution began at that moment, as oppression was no longer tolerated, leading to the Declaration of Independence. A text written to denounce all the atrocities that Dream's tyranny had committed and to declare the freedom of Lemanburg as a nation. In response, Dream created another text, the Declaration of War. It was now or never, the day of the Second Great War on the Dream Survival multiplayer between Dream's allies and the Lemanburg revolutionaries. That day had arrived, and regardless of the outcome, something was already more than clear to everyone on the server. There would be changes and there would be blood, a lot of blood. And what comes next, my friends, is August 4th, Independence Day. Dream demanded the day before that white flags be hung on the gates of Lemonburg, the kingdom of the revolutionaries, or else war would be declared. But the brave group that defied Dream's tyranny was already expecting and planning for a war. None of that would be surprising. They were unprepared, with less equipment, fewer people, and less territory. They had to rely on fate's goodwill to help the right, and so it was. On the morning of that day, no flag appeared on the walls, and the war for independence had begun. Tubbo, Wilbur, Tommy, Eret, and Fundy gathered in the van where it all began in the center of the walls. Dream and his army of players had climbed the walls and were now just watching the revolutionaries work on a plan. And Wilbur, the leader of Lemanburg, emphasized the importance of an element of surprise. They had no way of facing Dream and his people in a direct confrontation. While they discussed what to do, the enemies split up and surrounded them along Lemanburg's walls. Time was running out, and that was quite worrying, but Wilbur didn't want to give up his peaceful origins. He made a final attempt to resolve conflicts with the opposing team verbally, but it failed. With the confrontation over and officially sealed, Dream and the soldiers gathered at their base, now the battlefield. Lemanburg was small, and its people eventually became divided. Wilbur told his team that it would be more advantageous if he watched the fight from above, and so Tommy officially led the warriors during the conflict. They headed to their final destination, realizing that it would possibly be the last day of peace they would have on the server. The clashes would continue for a long time, and they knew nothing would be the same. The battle began. Sapnap, George, and Puns took up a vantage point in a watchtower, while Tommy, Tubbo, Fundy, and Eret stayed on the ground. They waited for the first attack, which took some time. Dream shot, but his arrow missed badly. Everyone thought he had missed, but he hadn't. It turns out his bow was enchanted, and a flaming arrow hit a pile of Trinitrotoluene he had already placed there strategically, and the explosion left the warriors of Lemanburg weakened. They had to hide and regroup, including Wilbur. They thought of several plans to destroy the enemy army, which was now constantly shooting at them, but nothing seemed to work. When Fundy thought of something really clever, the group noticed something. Actually, they noticed nothing. There were no more arrows hitting the walls where they were hiding. They looked at the tower but didn't see anyone. In the distance, however, they managed to spot Dream and his allies running toward Pong's tower, a giant structure next to another very tall tower. An ideal setting for war, but Dream's army didn't climb the tower. Instead, they attacked their enemies as they climbed. The people of Lemanburg climbed safely and atop the tower enjoyed a perfect view of their opponents. But there was more. The arrows from Dream, Sapnap, George, and Puns couldn't hit them because they were too high up. And realizing they had lost, Dream ordered his people to retreat. It was a huge victory for the Lemanburg revolution. Eret called everyone back to the city. He said he had dug a passage under the van, like a final control room, which had a surprise. Curious, everyone followed him into a dark room with just a button on the floor. Tommy couldn't resist and pressed it. The whole room filled with fire when Dream burst in from above and completely executed all the members of Lemanburg except for one. That's right, Eret betrayed the revolution. All the equipment belonging to Wilbur, Tubbo, Fundy, and Tommy was stolen. And so they gathered on top of the van where it all began to come up with a plan, and the more they thought, the clearer it became. They had nothing. They would have to follow the original principles, win with words. Wilbur tried negotiating with Dream alone, but it was useless. He also declared that if Lemanburg didn't raise the white flags and surrender, he would blow up the kingdom. Wilbur believed it was a bluff and accompanied the dictator to his home gates and the van. Ultimately, it wasn't a bluff. In a last violent act, Dream set off a Trinitrotoluene that triggered several more. And in the blink of an eye, Lemanburg was gone. Hopeless, Wilbur and Tommy went to negotiate the surrender, but before everything was settled, Tommy made one last proposal. One last duel, one final showdown between him and Dream, which would determine the future of the server, and to everyone's surprise, Dream accepted. If Tommy won, Lemanburg would become independent. If he lost, they'd lose freedom and have to submit to their worst enemy. A disc from the First War. The rules were simple. Both would have half a heart. With a bow and arrow, they would take 10 steps, turn around, and shoot in the Old West style. And so it was done. In a final act of hope, after 10 steps, Tommy shot and he missed. Dream, on the other hand, never missed his aim. The shot was precise, and so, once again, in the blink of an eye, Lemanburg had no more hope. It was a total defeat. Tommy lost a disc he'd spent days getting, and his dream of freedom seemed gone. Or was it? In a surprising move, Tommy offers his 2 independence discs, the cause of the First War and his only victory. He gives it up for the greater good and accepts. In an unexpected happy ending, L'Manberg was free. After Wilbur became president of the new independent kingdom, peace lasted for a while. In September of that year, the first annual L'Manberg election began. In this way, a struggle for power over L'Manberg was established, but not in the conventional way. No one on this server is normal. Everyone's messed up somehow, from potion smuggling to sabotage. He thought of a way to guarantee 100% that he would win, and that way would be by being the only candidate. No, this isn't a joke. Wilbur wanted an election with only himself as a candidate. That's why he was determined not to announce the election until the day it happened. And that way, only he would register and win by unanimous vote. Wilbur shared his plan with Tommy, his loyal sidekick, and organized the event. And when I say nothing works on the first try, I mean it. They only told one person about the idea. Quackity was new, but he developed one of the server's strongest personalities, the pursuit of power. He wanted control over everything whenever he had the chance. In short, Tommy and Wilbur couldn't have chosen anyone worse to tell their plans to. When he heard the story, Quackity boldly announced his candidacy in front of his new opponents. And he named his party So We Are Gamers. That's right, swag. After feeling the pressure, Wilbur decided he needed a good name to compete with Quackity. Politicians of Gaming was what he chose. POG. Yes, this is getting better and better. After that, Swag and POG started winning votes among the players on the server. Tommy and Wilbur saw Quackity picking the most influential people, so they spread fake news about their rival to undermine the party. Swag, when he heard about the fake news, Quackity was outraged and proposed an immediate debate, and that's how it happened. The first phase of the debate began. Quackity versus Wilbur. Quackity started by stating that L'Manberg, when run by Wilbur, prevented several people from entering the kingdom, including Quackity himself, which was true. He said if elected, he would change that and keep L'Manberg's gates open. Wilbur countered by stating that the original people of L'Manberg had been persecuted since the beginning of the server. Because of this, they couldn't let just anyone into their sacred territory, so the debate continued. Afraid of losing, Tommy bribed Carl, who ran the debate, to help the party, Poggy. Their plans were discovered and chaos broke out. After a few murders, the debate continued, now with Tubbo as the coordinator, while Tommy and George, Quackity's ally, were opponents. It was Pog versus Swag again. The debate topic was now conflict. George stated that in the early days of Dream Survival multiplayer, everything was peaceful until Tommy showed up and started bothering everyone, which was actually true. But of course, that was pretty hypocritical, since George and Dream were the ones responsible for starting and prolonging both wars on the server, and Tommy made sure to say it all. After a few more moments of chaos, Wilbur and Tommy decided that they had said enough and that they wouldn't continue the debate, with hope that the people wouldn't elect those who oppressed L'Manberg, and the elections began. Everything went as planned until a point. There were some revolts and fights, but nothing unusual for the Dream Survival multiplayer. Until something happened. A man appeared, Jishlat, a comedian who had already shown up on the server before. He stepped up to the podium and started a rather anarchist speech, influencing people to be their own presidents. Ironically, he then created a Jishlat 2020 party. Of course, a little bit egocentric, but just a little. Wilbur didn't want to accept that a party was created on election day. He had no choice, as the players began to revolt, so another party ran for office. Behind the scenes, Aker made a deal with Jishlat. If POG won, they would combine the votes of Swag and Jishlat 2020, creating a new party, with Jishlat as president and Quackity as vice president. Jishlat accepted, and voting began on Twitter. Over 200,000 people had voted by the next day, and Wilbur began reading the results to everyone. In fourth place, with 9% of the votes, Coconut 2020 Founding Party, which I didn't even mention because it didn't really make much difference. It was nearly a Cholo's runoff in 2018 with all due respect. In third place, Slat 2020 with 16% of the votes. In second place, Swag with 30% of the votes. And in first place, POG with 45% of the votes. But as I said before, the agreement still existed. Slat and Swag's combined votes totaled 46%, only 1% more than POG. With under 24 hours on the server, Jishlat became L'Manberg's new president, and his first speech was a disaster. His first move as president was banning Tommy and Wilbur from L'Manberg's borders. Exactly. The friends went from national leaders to enemies of their kingdom in seconds. and they had to run. They escaped through an underground tunnel and built a shelter a few hundred meters away from civilization. Starting from scratch and often crying in the shower, they faced Exile, prompting Slat to announce another speech. The next, more threatening measure was to destroy the walls that had protected the kingdom from the start. Tommy and Wilbur gathered on a nearby hill to watch their own kingdom fall before their eyes. There, they decided that they needed to act, but not alone, never alone. Tommy had an old friend, but not just any friend. Far from it. This friend, alongside Dream, was considered the top Minecraft player of the time, winning a 3 versus 21 and even beating Dream in a deadly battle. I'm excited to introduce a new member who would forever change the Dream survival multiplayer, Technoblade. Wilbur and Tommy created a secret base in a ravine. Tubbo, who was previously part of L'Manberg, joined the trio as a spy. Pogtopia was formed as a new kingdom to resist oppression in L'Manberg, which had been renamed. Schlatt burned the flag and renamed the kingdom Manberg, erasing all traces of Tommy and Wilbur. The people of Manberg already feared his dictatorial rule, and as Pogtopia threatened Schlatt with signs spread throughout the kingdom, the people began to support the revolution. And afraid of losing more people, Schlatt proposed a festival to celebrate all the progress he had made. By expanding the borders of the former L'Manberg, a secret underground passage was built from the kingdom of Pogtopia to Manberg. Technoblade, Tommy, Wilbur, and Tubbo agreed. The day of the festival was perfect for the final attack, but Wilbur had become corrupted, seeing his former kingdom turn against him and the walls torn down. After his exile, he stopped wanting to save L'Manberg and instead wanted to destroy it so no one else could have it. And so he joined the enemy who feared the rapid expansion of Manberg. He joined Dream, and he provided all the Trinitrotoluene and Redstone needed. It was now or never. But at the festival, seeing his friends happy, Wilbur faltered. He called Tubbo for a conversation and put the fate of Manberg in his hands. If he ended the speech with quote, "Let the festival begin," Wilbur would detonate all the TNTs he had planted beneath Manberg. And yes, that's exactly how he said it. Before he could leave the stage and escape the explosion, Schlatt and Quackity imprisoned him. Then a plot twist occurred. And I said this series was like Game of Thrones. That was never a festival, that was an execution. Schlatt knew about Tubbo's spying and ordered Technoblade to reveal himself and kill him. And that's what he did, outraging the whole population and especially Wilbur and Tommy Nick. A citizen of Manberg publicly criticized Schlatt's actions and he ordered her to be executed as well. But Wilbur showed up to intervene, and while he was arguing with Schlatt, Nick managed to escape and reunite with Tommy and Tubbo. Wilbur and Technoblade were in Pogtopia. After arguing, they settled down and Wilbur struck a deal with Technoblade. If they had the chance again, the two of them would blow up Manberg without even thinking twice. In turn, the people of Manberg were completely outraged by Schlatt's actions. And so, one by one, everyone left to join Pogtopia. And that included Quackity himself and even Eret, who had already betrayed the people of L'Manberg the first time. Now, Schlatt was left with only Carl, which honestly isn't much against about 15 people. Schlatt, worried about his fate, met with Dream, who still hadn't taken a side in the war. He offered a secret book for an alliance, and Dream, intrigued, accepted. Now, with the most powerful man on the server by his side, things were balanced, but not entirely. The war began in the early hours of the 16th. Pogtopia carried out several attacks against the Manberg army, and Wilbur realized that they were finally winning. Dream realized something. Before being executed, he asked to speak with Wilbur alone. He pointed out the fact that Schlatt didn't even show up to the battle, and said it didn't make sense to fight for someone so lazy. He surrendered for Manberg, and from now on, L'Manberg again. The two armies gathered around Schlatt at his house, and before they could execute him, he took his own life. L'Manberg was free once again. Almost all the members of the server were gathered as good friends to celebrate, and a new leader needed to be elected. Unanimously, everyone chose Tubbo, who had been wrong before, and everything seemed happy. But there was a traitor. There always was, from the very beginning. During the celebration, one member was missing, Wilbur. He ran to the secret chamber which he had built behind the hill, and there was only a single button in the center. Meeting with Filza, his great friend. From the beginning, things were pretty tense, but not as tense as outside. In a rage, Technoblade betrayed his leader. He said, "You want to be a hero, Tommy, then die like one." That way, he escaped, executing Tommy, with almost no one else knowing where he had gone. He was strictly against governments. According to him, Sledge wasn't the problem, governments were. While they argued, Wilbur spoke the words that would mark the end of L'Manberg forever. He says, "There was a saying, Filza, it was never meant to be," then presses the button. L'Manberg is blown up, and as his last request, he begs Filza to execute him, and so he did. It was over. L'Manberg, united for the last time, was destroyed and thrown into chaos. The fights were in vain, and the victories were false. Nothing else existed except for the ruins of what had once been a kingdom of freedom. Now, already in ruins, the story continues, where the young Tubbo faces conflicts and even manipulations to rebuild the city. Dream Survival Multiplayer is definitely my favorite YouTube series. We can continue. At this moment, the series was entering a period of calm, considering that Sledge was out of the picture because he had died. Last episode, Technoblade betrayed the revolutionaries and fled, while Dream disappeared. Now nothing remains. It was up to Tubbo to rebuild the city, since he had sacrificed a lot to get there. He only had trust in his best friend Tommy. A few explosions couldn't destroy their legacy. And so, the next day, gathering all the remaining citizens, they began the reconstruction. So, in no time, L'Manberg was back more peaceful than ever. Wilbur, despite logically respawning, wouldn't return because the server uses a canonical 3-life system. That basically means that if a player loses 3 lives at a relevant moment, they're considered dead in the universe. Wilbur was finally killed by Filza, a new player, marking his last and true death. A real-life canonical life system would be interesting, except for Morena, who already has 7. Important fact, Tommy and Tubbo only had 1 canonical life left, considering Albert's betrayal, Tommy's duel with Dream, and Tubbo's execution at the festival. While Wilbur hadn't really disappeared, he came back, but not really. Now Wilbur was a ghost. Ghosts are innocent characters, they don't have any bad memories and don't understand that people can be evil. And so, Ghost Wilbur only had the goal of making more friends and getting better. L'Manberg was his home, living in a library in the sewers. Meanwhile, Tommy was struggling. He and Rainbow, a new player, set George's house on fire. In the past few days, several players had reported fires and thefts in their houses, with signs written by Tommy. Now everyone was certain he was responsible. Dream, enraged, built a massive obsidian wall around L'Manberg's port city. All the players logged in to understand what was happening. While they asked questions, Dream just told them to talk to Tommy. Tommy denied any involvement with the fire at George's house, and Tubbo found himself forced to talk directly to Dream. Dream in turn said that if nothing was done to punish Tommy, he would keep building walls and worse things would happen. It was a threat. Tubbo's goal of peace would soon end. Dream then proposed exiling the city's creator. The current president, Tubbo, faced a tough choice: betray his people or his best friend. Following another serious fight between Tommy and Dream, things escalated until they came up with an idea. Tubbo gathered the court and Tommy thought of something. Instead of denying or accepting exile, they should fight Dream. None of them stood a chance, of course, but someone did, someone who now remained distant in a house in the middle of the snow. Technoblade. They would recruit Technoblade. Climbing up the walls, Tommy, Tubbo, Quackity, and Founding went to inform the server's most powerful man of the decision. Tubbo took the floor and, in a twist, contrary to what they had agreed on, stated that they had decided to exile Tommy for the good of L'Manberg. Everyone on the wall was outraged, except Dream, who was pleased with the decision. Just like that, without goodbyes, Tubbo exiled him. As Tommy was escorted out of the city by Dream, someone joined the two, the ghost of Wilbur, who from then on would be his only friend. It's complicated when your only friend is the ghost of a terrorist who destroyed your city, but that's all he had. And together, the 3 of them walked through deserts, mountains, hundreds of blocks, oceans, until Dream decided they were far enough away. And there, he forced him to sleep so they could set their spawn point there. And then he made him destroy all his items and left, leaving the ghost and Tommy alone. Wilbur's ghost gave Tommy a compass that, according to him, would always point to Tubbo, wherever he was. And days turned into weeks, and every time he made progress, Dream would return to the shelter and destroy all his items again. Tommy started to wonder if Dream was really that bad. After all, besides Wilbur's ghost, he was the only one who visited him frequently. Missing his friends, Tommy planned a beach party together with the ghost. He decorated and made all the preparations and asked his friend to invite all the citizens of L'Manberg. A few minutes passed after the party started and the only guest present was Dream, but they couldn't have forgotten, right? Tommy knew his friends missed him, he needed them too, but no one came. Tommy started to feel bitter. He pictured people celebrating his absence in L'Manberg, believing that if Tobo were exiled, everyone would visit him. He had lost hope in his friends. Now, the only ones he considered were Dream and the ghost of Wilbur, but Tommy's bold spirit was not silenced. When Dream destroyed his items weekly, he still saved a few. He built an underground shelter and started gathering everything he had, but one day everything went wrong. Dream found his shelter and said that was his last chance. Now he would be completely alone. Dream destroyed everything Tommy owned, vowed never to see him again, and banned him from the Nether. Tommy was really sad for losing his last friend. Now he truly felt alone, just alone. But all this time came from a different perspective. In L'Manberg, Tubo watched his best friend's exile with coldness, but he still missed him. Wilbur's ghost brought a gift, a compass that, he said, always pointed to Tommy. Everyone in L'Manberg already missed their friend when rumors began about an upcoming beach party. Dream, however, said that no citizen of L'Manberg had been invited by Tommy. Disappointed and upset, Tubbo decided not to exist, thinking Tommy resented them all. And then, while Tommy patiently waited for his friends, Tubbo and everyone else struggled with the urge to visit their companion. Dream was definitely a bad man. As they waited for Tommy to miss them in L'Manberg, Tubbo, Quackity, Fauna, and Humble set new priorities. There were only two threats to L'Manberg at the time, Dream and Technoblade. But they didn't want to take down Dream yet, since their relationship had been very peaceful ever since Tommy had been exiled. But Technoblade was a problem. They were sure he was planning another attack. And so, to find him, they created the Butcher Army. Yes, an army of butchers, since Technoblade was a pig. Rumor had it only one person knew his location, Filza, his best friend who executed Wilbur. Coincidentally, Filza lived in L'Manberg. So, the Butcher Army went to his residence to interrogate the guy. And there, they started searching for evidence of Technoblade's whereabouts. After a few seconds, Tubo found a compass pointing to Technoblade's shelter, which Filza used as a guide. However, now this object would be used to lead the army directly to the anarchist's house. From Technoblade's perspective, however, things were different. He fled and with Filza's help relocated his belongings to a remote cabin in the snowy wilderness. He lived peacefully there, retired from violence, vowing never to harm anyone that way again. He sought peace, but didn't get it. The quartet invaded and threatened to execute him. Technoblade tried to explain that he had left violent methods behind, but it didn't help, so having no other choice, he attacked. Without me, he would have easily beaten all four. He executed Tubbo and Founding without a scratch, but Quackity had an idea. Carl was Technoblade's horse, his only good friend and squire. Seeing his companion's life depended on him, Technoblade surrendered and was taken to the L'Manberg port for execution. But he didn't throw everything away. Technoblade wasn't that dumb. He kept a Totem of Undying in his inventory. He was trapped in a glass cell in the city's center with an anvil hanging above him that would execute him if it fell. While Tubbo was listing Technoblade's crimes, something happened. Ponzi, Dream's friend, teleported into the crowd and attacked the citizens. Desperate, Quackity pulled the lever, dropping the anvil. At that moment, Technoblade used a totem for a second life. He jumped over the anvil and escaped the cell. Dream waited with his horse and some supplies, unusually generous. Technoblade had a full set of iron armor and a netherite pickaxe. Quackity, who wasn't satisfied, showed up at the last moment wearing netherite armor and wielding a diamond axe. In a tough fight, or maybe not so tough, Technoblade won. Of course he won. He's Technoblade. The legend would never know death in player versus player. Technoblade never dies. And, after defeating his former revolutionary companion, he fled home with his horse. When he got there, Tommy, yes, Tommy the Exile, was waiting for him. He had found his home after wandering aimlessly for a long time. After a strange, funny talk, Technoblade had an idea. He said that if the government didn't exist, Tommy could take his chances and be friends with Tubbo again. He then suggested forming a team to destroy L'Manberg again. And then, before getting an answer, Technoblade decided to show something. Hidden behind a hill, there was a room that went against all of his peaceful ideals. Actually, my friends, Technoblade never really had a good relationship with peace, and now it was all over. In just a few square meters, the walls display dozens of skeleton heads, wither, and that's not all. Soul sand, explosives, netherite gear, he definitely wasn't peaceful. And the next attack, according to him, should be the last. L'Manberg's days were numbered again. And here comes the biggest war this server has ever seen. This time by his side he had a garage with an arsenal of war and dozens of wither skulls. Destruction is nearly certain, but what will this war's outcome be? Come with me to find out. Of course, for Tommy that meant betraying the Solar, but he was bitter. Based on what Dream said, they had all abandoned him and he no longer cared. And what about the great Technoblade? Even though he was tempted for a while to live a peaceful life, L'Manberg's citizens captured and tried to execute him. Violence was the only language that world understood, and he spoke it fluently. In L'Manberg, the Butcher army was enraged. They realized Technoblade could never have escaped execution. If it weren't for Dream, Dream was the first to attack the kingdom. Dream was the one who gave the explosives to Wilbur so he could destroy the city. Dream forced them to exile Tommy. Everything went back to Dream. He was the real enemy. And after that conclusion, they started thinking of a plan to assassinate Dream. Simply attacking him wouldn't be very effective. They had to be smart, so they came up with an idea. In the server's history, only one planned execution had worked, Tubbo's, which led to his own death. Thinking they were just at a festival, only then did they realize the festival was the answer. They would hold another festival to execute Dream, when he least expected it. Meanwhile, Dream was looking for his friend, using many quotation marks, Exiled, who had run away. He assumed he was at Technoblade's house, which was the only place he really didn't control, so he started there. Fortunately, Technoblade was an excellent liar, and he hid Tommy while he distracted Dream with quick and precise answers, the true enemy of Metaferando. Still suspicious, Dream returned to the cabin the next day, but Technoblade was gone. Only Tommy and the ghost of Wilbur were there, who would have to find a way to lie. Even though he was the purest creature that exists, he tried. But of course, someone who doesn't know evil isn't a good manipulator. Dream was convinced that Tommy was hiding in the cabin, but he decided to leave. The next day was the Double Quackity Festival. Humble and Founding were anxious about their execution plans but remained confident. Meanwhile, Technoblade and Tommy were getting ready to return to L'Manberg and watch the Festival of Shadows since they weren't allowed to enter. And when the time came, everyone was present except for one person. Dream. It was confusing. No army member had leaked the execution plan. Butcher Dream was probably just late, right? The answer came soon after. Wearing netherite armor, Dream rebuilt the obsidian walls he had destroyed after Tommy's exile. Worried, the citizens approached. Technoblade and Tommy were also watching, using invisibility potions. Dream started to speak. He said that Tommy had destroyed the community house, which was a lie, and Dream accused Tommy. He imagined the worst things possible, forcing the invisible player to reveal himself, which is exactly what happened. And he started to speak, revealing his presence. He said that everything that had been said was a lie and started arguing with Tubbo, his best friend. At the end of a very heated argument, he said these words, quote, "The discs are more important than you." He's a fucking Markworn. He was always quite mean, right? And he regretted it. Right after that, he said that Tubbo should give the disc to Dream, trying to make up for it, and so he did. The moment that happened, Dream exploded. He admitted to destroying the community house and said he'd destroy L'Manberg the next day. He admitted he only pretended to be friends with the kingdom members to get the last disc, and now that he had it, nothing else mattered. He explained how he knew the plan. Humble was a traitor. From the beginning, he harshly criticized Tubbo, saying he was the dumbest president in the history of the server, for giving the city's only protection directly to the enemy. In the end, he allied with Technoblade, giving the citizens only one night to say goodbye to the city. The end was very near, but they weren't ready to give up, putting aside all the differences they had between them. They used that night to gather resources. However, some did not choose their sides. Many thought that Le Man should learn his lesson, and one of them was Fundy, a former member of the Butcher army. In one final act of rebellion, he destroyed all the supplies people had gathered. At night, after nearly witnessing his best friend die, Filza joined the dark side. Technoblade and Dream. The next day, Tommy realized it was over when he saw the supplies were gone. Dream had covered the skies of Le Man with TNTs and drained all the water to enable the explosion. Technoblade had more than 20 withers by his side. They had no chance. After the massacre, Dream pressed the button to launch the TNTs. In the blink of an eye, L'Manberg no longer existed, and this time it was for real. No rebuilding, no peace, all the power was in their hands. The people gave up. There was no point in fighting anymore. Quackity, Tubbo, Tommy and Wilbur's ghost sang the Layman anthem, watching the destruction from the top of the platform where the TNTs had been launched by Dream. Even though his whole dream had been destroyed, Tommy felt good. He had his friends back, especially Tubbo. But that wasn't all that mattered now. Just like in the first war, Dream had the discs, and the great duo Tubbo and Tommy wanted them back. So, to finish, everything that started meant the discs would be theirs. Tommy got a message from Dream telling him to log into the server and return to his old house. When he arrived, he saw a chest with a sign saying only Tommy and Tubbo were allowed. If anyone else arrived, the discs would be destroyed. Inside the chest was a compass called Your Discs. Tommy knew what to do. He and Tubbo prepared. These were their final canonical lives. They said goodbye to everything they'd known since the start of the Dream Survival multiplayer. About to leave, they noticed some strange movement on the main road. All the players on the server gathered to say goodbye with honor. Friends and enemies alike were there. After an emotional conversation with everyone, Tommy and Tubbo set out against Dream, just like it had been from the beginning. The difference was that if they died now, everything would be over. They were sure of it. That was the setting for the final battle. As they climbed, the sun was setting behind them. When they arrived, they came face to face with Dream, who had the 3 discs in his inventory, and the battle immediately began. Dream hadn't done much damage, but the duo had nearly used up their potions. Suddenly, Dream paused to speak. He said the discs weren't real, he was just messing with them, showing how powerful he was. He ordered them to toss all their items into a hole to be destroyed, leaving them no choice. Dream was actually much better. They obeyed. Dream guided them to the mountain's base and told them to step on a platform. It descended into the mountain's interior, reaching a vast obsidian room where the precious discs lay in plain sight on the floor. Dream told Tommy he could steal them, but he'd kill Thumble if he did. Tommy never considered stealing. Dream continued, claiming Tommy only caused problems on the server. Except for one thing, attachment. Through Tommy, he realized that controlling attachments meant controlling people. Feelings make them weaker, and that's how it was with the discs, with L'Manbourg, with Thumble, or with Tommy himself. The people cared for him, so instead of killing him, he built an inescapable prison further down the mountain. He revealed that Tommy would stay there for the rest of his days, guaranteeing power to Dream because no one would challenge him once he had Tommy's life in his hands. The only way to prove he wasn't joking was to kill Thumble, so Dream let Tommy say goodbye. He refused, but they still had an emotional conversation. Thumble embraced his death, satisfied with his accomplishments, gazing into his best friend's eyes. They ended as they began, until a light suddenly shone in the nether portal inside the hall. Hans, Dream's most trusted soldier, emerged. "Sorry, Dream, you should have paid me more." When he spoke, flashes followed one after another, just like in Endgame and Infinity War with all the heroes. Players, whether allies or foes of Dream's army or L'Manbourg, emerged from the portal fully armed to save the 2 friends. Dream was shocked. Now he was really in a lower position. For the first time, the people had grown tired of his dictatorship and evil. That was the end. Tommy told him to discard his items, and he complied. Afterward, Tommy killed him twice. Now he had just 1 canonical life left. But death wasn't the best punishment for someone like Dream. So, proving that even the blocky world can turn around, Tommy locked Dream in the very prison Dream himself designed to be impossible to escape from. But that wasn't the only reason he was spared. Desperate, Dream uttered the words that doomed him to life in prison. "Tommy, I can bring people back to life." And so it began. He revealed that the book Sledge gave him for their Second War partnership held a secret to revive people. As he did with Tommy, Dream was imprisoned for power, and the server remained peaceful for weeks. While everyone was dedicated to their own projects, Tommy and Tubbo sat together to celebrate, just like the first time Dream had lost. And they had the discs. It was all too perfect to be true. After the destruction of L'Manbourg for the 3rd time, Dream seemed to have everything under control. Except for one thing, the people Tommy and Tubbo were more loved than he imagined. In the end, being a feared dictator wasn't enough to keep control. But now he's just a prisoner in an impossible to escape prison. What will be the outcome of this final act? Yeah, at that moment, projects had already begun for the restoration of the old L'Manbourg. A feeling of joy and freedom was spreading throughout the entire server. After 6 months of oppression, Tommy promised to visit Dream in prison, but with bad intentions. He wanted to rub his victory in Dream's face, just like Dream did during his first Exile visit. Dream unexpectedly apologized, saying he was sad for losing everything. Tommy suspected he was lying, but Dream said he had no reason to, which made sense. since he would be locked up forever in a maximum security prison. Although Dream was physically imprisoned, no one could ever take his strategy from him. Sam, who built the prison, was also its only guard. As Sam grew more unstable, so did Pandora's vault, the prison. Then he started. He first sought to attract allies. Starting with Bad Boy Halo, his second visitor, Dream knew his friend very well and knew that the best way to get his support was by playing the victim. Acting like a drama king, he described prison life as hell and quickly gained Bad Boy Halo's sympathy. Afterward, he adopted a regime of silence and ignored Sam entirely, which increasingly irritated him. Even when Sapnap, Dream's close friend, visited, the silence remained. Dream just kept making plans. He silently fantasized repeatedly about the day he'd escape, knowing it would happen. He was more confident in his potential than anyone else. He thought about how he would make all those mediocre inhabitants of L'Manberg suffer before executing each one of them. After much thought, it was done. The perfect plan. The loophole in every security system is people. Sam felt pressured. His job was the most important on the server, ensuring everyone's freedom by imprisoning one person. Although he liked his job, he eventually fell into a routine. Dream kept psychologically torturing him, always demanding more and never letting him rest. Sam broke down, only seeing the sunrise or sunset through prison walls. There was little difference between him and Dream. Both were trapped. He didn't do anything to deserve that, while Dream kept insisting on ruining the little piece that remained. Soon Sam was in worse shape than his prisoner. Sam wanted to kill Dream. But if that happened, the knowledge about the Book of Resurrection would also be lost, making death permanent. He held the Dream Survival multiplayer's future, so he stayed vigilant. Still, he was tired, but not for long. A few days after the imprisonment, Tom scheduled one last visit, signing the required entrance terms everyone needed to enter the vault. He certified that if the visitor broke any rule, Sam could eliminate him without consequences. Additionally, another term stated that if an incident occurred during the visit, the visitor would be detained for 7 days until the issue was resolved. And Tom wanted this to be his last visit. He was there precisely for that, to say goodbye to Dream. He had spent too much time in the shadow of his friend and needed to move on. But as he was saying all that, something happened. First, the sound of a fuse being lit. A series of explosions. Several TNTs detonated on the prison ceiling. The event didn't cause any damage, of course, since the entire structure was made of obsidian. However, still a bit suspicious, Tom announced that the visit was over. He waited for Sam for 1, 2, 3 minutes, but no one came. Dream was very excited, while Tom grew desperate. Sam sent a chat message. 7 days. TNTs on the prison roof were unusual. That was an attempted break-in, and an attempted break-in, of course, was a serious incident that happened during a visit, and Tom had signed the terms. Now, just like that, he would spend 7 days confined with his worst enemy. Dream's escape plan was starting. It was a tough week. Everyone on the server was pressuring Sam to find the root of the problem quickly. Since Tom was a highly respected person, inside the cell, Dream and Tom argued day and night, 7 days in total. The day of Tom's release had arrived. However, as usual, more and more news came in, and Sam hadn't found any evidence that could prove Tom's innocence. So, he would have to stay there indefinitely. That was probably the worst punishment he could suffer, being confined with that lunatic for even longer. But with a light bulb going off, Tom thought of something. Dream insisted on the idea of the book, capable of bringing people back to life for a long time. But what if it was a bluff, and Dream was lying to buy time to escape? Tom began accusing Dream of this. He called Dream a sad man. Bitter his server moved on, but Dream was done listening. They started fighting violently. Arguments, insults, accusations, and punches continued until Tom shouted, "Stop, I only have 2 hearts left, look at me." Pasar, I doubt that book exists. Jishlat, I saw your grave and your body there. It's real. In a calm tone of voice, as cold as ever, Dream's words were spoken slowly. Why don't you go visit him? But 4 hits followed. 2 hearts, 1.5, 1, half, and 0. In seconds, Tom's journey on that server ended. His last life was gone, dead forever. But is it? Death isn't permanent after all. After darkness fell, Tom heard a voice he'd listened to for the past 7 days. Too familiar. Tom, how was it? No one has died and returned before. Tom was back as quickly as he left. Back to life. The book was real. Dream really did have the power to bring people back to life. He was untouchable and Tom knew it. Tom returned in 2 days for Dream, but not for himself. From his perspective, he spent 20 days in Limbo, an afterlife dimension. There he met Jschlat and more importantly Wilbur, but not as he expected. Tom begged the Dream not to bring him back after seeing what Wilbur had become and planned to do. Tom promised that he could even be Dream's friend if he didn't revive Wilbur. Maybe an old dictator wasn't the most dangerous man on the server. The real danger was in the one he missed the most. And there was an obvious solution: kill Dream. He was the only one capable of reviving the real enemy of everything and everyone. But as he was about to act, he remembered that if he killed Dream, Sam would think he caused the Trinitrotolin incident. Tom would take the prisoner's place, confined in Pandora's vault forever. He believed that fate was far worse than death, so he abandoned the idea. He then waited for Sam to get him out of there, but he didn't show up. Sam had witnessed Tommy's supposed death. All his efforts to protect the members of the server were in vain because he couldn't protect the only person who depended solely on him. Sam doubted his competence and, feeling guilty, avoided Dream for several more weeks. No one had any idea that Tommy had been revived. One day, determined to face the results of his irresponsibility, the guard returned, only to realize that what he thought was final was not death. Tommy was released from prison. Memorials and statues honoring him were everywhere on the server. Everyone mourned the loss of one of Dream Survival multiplayer's most beloved members, but suddenly he returned. But things weren't and would never be the same as before. Tommy couldn't let Dream play God. He explained to Tubbo and Humble that the only way to ensure the server's safety was by eliminating Dream. Breaking into the vault was impossible due to its strong protection inside and out. The only solution would be to sneak in using potions during a visit, but that wouldn't happen because visits were completely suspended after Tommy's incident. But they thought of someone who wouldn't pose any risk. Wilbur's ghost had infinite lives, so he wasn't in any danger during the visit. After a long talk, Sam let the ghost enter. After reviewing the plan and ensuring everything was fine, Tommy infiltrated the vault. Everything was going as planned. It was foolproof. Tommy would go unnoticed and Wilbur's ghost was safe. The two crossed the bridge together. Tommy drew his weapon and suddenly Sam ordered them to stop. Tommy still didn't have enough distance to carry out the plan and Sam saw the axe. When Tommy held it, he saw it through his invisible body and couldn't believe it. He was about to end all the torment on the server and couldn't fail now. After revealing himself, Sam ordered Tommy to go back to the other side of the lava river away from Dream. Tommy knew if he disobeyed, Sam could Zagota him for good. With a heavy heart, he went back, leaving the ghost of Wilbur alone while he argued with Sam about killing Dream and ending that nightmare. The prisoner had an idea. It was his escape. The ghost of Wilbur, after all, was a ghost. He could only exist if his original self was dead. And with that same cynical smile, Dream would make that stop being true. Quote, "You promised me everything would be okay, Tommy," unquote. Those words echoed in the vault as lava flowed down, permanently separating Tommy from his enemy. But that wasn't the most important part of a glimpse that would haunt him for the rest of his days. The purest being on the server, the only one incapable of committing any evil. Desperate, on the shoulder by the side of the bridge, begging for his own existence, that was entertainment for Dream. Tommy watched his friend disappear. Wilbur's ghost was dead, but that was only possible under certain conditions. Since he didn't have infinite lives, his death needed justification. Something posed a far greater threat than a lunatic locked in a vault. Something like the bombing of a city and its destruction for the third time. Wilbur Soot was alive. He had spent over 13 years in Limbo, but now he was in Lemonburg, the city he had destroyed himself. Now he was a different man, with white hair and scars. After a long time, he could look his old friends in the eyes and smile. He was the happiest person in the world, simply for being alive, even considering that the server was destroyed. The sun was rising on the horizon. After 13 years in Limbo, Wilbur finally had his first contact with life. For him, things had just begun. Tommy trusted Wilbur and introduced him to the server again. Together, they explored the changes that had happened over all those years. First, he explained that Technoblade and Dream had destroyed the city with Trinitrotoluene because they refused to accept Tommy and Tubbo's rule. Tommy took Wilbur to a nearby hotel's rooftop to keep discussing the city's changes. Tommy knew he had lost Wilbur's ghost forever in that prison because of himself. He should be angry at Wilbur, but he couldn't. Wilbur was experiencing extra ghostly memories from his ghost. Wilbur managed to remember Tommy's exile, the pain, the manipulation, he saw it all. But that didn't matter, because Dream had been responsible for taking him out of the loneliness of limbo and bringing him back to life. To Wilbur, Dream wasn't evil. He believed Dream was the only one who could keep things under control. Now with his imprisonment, Lemonburg needed a new leader for the throne he had left vacant years ago by his death. Everyone wanted that power, but Dream was a brave dictator. That was enough for him to take the position. He was the one who put people in their place, and in Wilbur's opinion, that's why they threw Dream in prison. Maybe Dream was the hero, his manipulation, trickery, and evil justified by a desire to maintain order. Tommy strongly disagreed. Dream reviving Wilbur appeared to give him control of his mind. Tommy knew he needed to find a way to fix Wilbur's distorted view, but that moment hadn't come yet. Setting aside their differences, the two spent the day together. For a few moments, Tommy and Wilbur felt free again. 2 months had passed since Dream was imprisoned, leaving the throne cold and empty. However, I don't think a city can go that long without a leader. Do you remember Quackity? He lost a life to Technoblade while trying to stop him from escaping, leaving him at rock bottom. He, who had already run for president of Lemonburg. Since then, Quackity started working on his plan for revenge, where he wanted to do what he wanted to do. He did it, he wanted to. What he wanted. He managed to do what he wanted. He managed to do what he wanted to do. He commanded. He managed to do what he wanted to do. If there's a subtitle left. In the plan to build a new kingdom, at first Foolish denied it and seemed resistant since he was happy, away from everyone and with his buildings. With strong arguments, Quackity proved he was useless there, and those words broke him inside. Feeling forgotten, he found himself with an insatiable desire to be part of something bigger. Because of that, he accepted Quackity's invitation. Quackity spoke with Purbody, attempted to start conflicts, and even destroyed his house to force him. Ultimately, Purbody accepted the invitation. He sought power and wanted to feel important in Quackity's new kingdom. He also managed to recruit Fundy, who at that time was living far away. Quackity was able to manipulate and convince them, and so in an extraordinary way, the sun shone on Nevadas, the name of the city those first citizens were forming. There was a guy who just showed up there and was included. Don't ask me who he is. And together they aimed to be the most powerful nation that server had ever seen, and a new member also joined them. Sam was the guard in charge of keeping Doreen locked up, but as you know, this made him a prisoner too, and that was driving him crazy. At that moment he wanted to take a break, and so together they were able to build Nevadas, a highly futuristic city with towers, lots of lights, and blinking LEDs. What would drive that city would be the casinos. Yes, they really went with that. A highly luxurious city that would be maintained through gambling money. And far from there, in the ruins of Lemonburg, Wilbur found a note. In that letter, it said that he was right all along, so he knew exactly what to do. With Tommy, they went to Nevadas and were shocked by what they saw. Nevadas was practically a new country, where Quackity was the loan shark president, and he, as a leader, did not accept it. Wilbur was an impulsive and unpredictable person who had even destroyed the old Lemonburg. He was. Because of that, on the other hand, Wilbur created a country called Paradise, literally right next to Nevadas. He wanted competition, he wanted to live capitalism. In the middle of all this was Tommy, someone divided between the two nations. Both sides wanted Tommy and even fought each other over him. He decided to stay with his friend who destroyed Lemonburg. Tommy joined Wilbur in Paradise. They first proposed selling hamburgers to compete with Nevadas since they were living capitalism. Humble was the first member who agreed to join so they could gather resources and start the new McDonald's. As a counterattack, Quackity managed to convince Tubbo to join Nevadas, and the person responsible for the restaurant competing with Nevadas would end up being Tubbo himself. Wilbur saw it as betrayal since Humble, Tubbo's best friend, was in Paradise instead of Nevadas. And so Quackity, for being manipulative, started to be seen as a threat. Someone was dividing people and controlling a country. To stop him from taking over the server, Wilbur and Humble realized they had to act and needed help. On a rainy night, Quackity looks at Pandora's vault prison and with Sam prepares a final plan. And he explains that, even while imprisoned, Dream had a powerful book in his hands. It didn't matter how many walls were keeping him inside. He couldn't be killed as long as he had that book. Quackity's plan was to make Dream give up that book of his own free will, otherwise he would have to persuade him. Once Dream surrendered, Sam, the prison guard, would no longer have to watch him, which meant freedom. And so, they both decided to put the plan into action. The two of them entered the prison together, and for the first time, Dream felt fear. Sam assured him Quackity wouldn't hurt him, they just wanted the book. Quackity had people, land power, and influence. The only thing he lacked was the book that could bring people back to life. Dream glared at Quackity with blood in his eyes, and to show all the tools he carried in his inventory, exactly the same tools he would use to get what he wanted. He couldn't kill Dream, but returned daily to get closer. It's said, Quackity wanted to turn Dream's life into a nightmare until he gave in and handed over the book, but Dream resisted. He stayed silent, knowing the book was the key to his survival. Days became weeks as Quackity continued to oppress him. However, that didn't seem to be working and everyone was getting impatient. Dream resisted pressure, so Quackity devised a plan to write a note to get Technoblade to visit. Technoblade had been missing for months in Snowchester. Quackity knew his anarchist stance made him a threat to his own kingdom, Nevada. With no other option, Dream, exhausted from fighting, agreed to write Technoblade a note. Since Dream Survival Multiplayer began, Technoblade believed power could change even the kindest person. He fought wars, betrayed friends, and opposed governments to defend his beliefs. Still, it seemed the government would always cross his path. On the server, the Pigman would accept the invitation publicly, but with a clever plan in mind. Technoblade is a war master, so he'd know the right strategy to use. With the help of his best friend Filza, the two established the Syndicate, which had the Syndicate House as its objective. It would maintain anarchist ideas and would not have a leader, therefore all members could act on their own will. However, just 2 people would not be enough, so they went ahead with a plan to recruit new members, namely Nikki and Rambo. 4 players, along with Palm from the Union, promised to overthrow any government that might arise. On June 1st, Technoblade's birthday, the Union members gathered for a party to celebrate. Fireworks lit the sky and a cake was baked. That would be a day of despair, rest, because Technoblade had just returned from training. He spent a month in the jungle and in the snow, honing his skills. At night, during a conversation with his friends, they realized that someone was watching them. Even in the dark, they knew who it was. Technoblade immediately left the party and the celebration to go confront that person. He climbed the hill and at the top met Quakerin, the man who had tried to execute him and whom he had taken out with a pickaxe. Despite past conflicts, Quakerin delivered Dream's message to Technoblade.
I don't want to waste your time. I came here for something important. You know, Dream, he's in prison.
Oh, I've heard of that guy, right?
I have been visiting Dream recently. He told me that he wanted you to visit.
You're telling the truth, right? I would hate to be lied to on my birthday, no.
I'm not lying.
Technoblade is like Thomas Shelby in the dialogues, cold and calculating. They also set aside their differences. The past is over. Technoblade didn't trust that man, but owed Dream a favor. Dream mainly saved him from execution, and for a while, he wondered why Dream wanted him there. Technoblade is like Batman, always prepared. He organized ideas and decided at the last minute to say goodbye again. He crossed mountains, forests, and oceans to meet an old ally. For the first time, he faced the shadow of Pandora's enormous vault, and so the pigman crossed the portal and met Dream, and at the touch of a button, the lava started to lower. Finally, the two exchanged glances in that view. And Technoblade was happy but surprised. Surprised because he saw Dream paralyzed by fear. Techno, confused, nodded to Sam the guard, and the bridge moved toward Dream.
Dream? What's up, Techno no Crackety? It's a
trap.
I kinda had a feeling he was lying, but I kinda had to visit anyways. Hey Sam, how long do I have to be here before you let me out?
Think you could do with a nice long stay with Dream? They're probably the main threat too.
Would never defy authority. Alright, I love authority. Everybody will tell you how much Technoblade loves authority. Sam, this is not doing much to change my political opinions.
Man, what a plot twist. The most powerful and feared players on the server were now locked up in Pandora's vault under maximum security. They were together in the loneliest place on the Dream Survival multiplayer, and only Technoblade could get Dream out. His only hope of seeing the world again was taken, leaving him completely hopeless. The prison became his limbo and no one could save him. He was certain he'd be trapped there forever. However, Technoblade was not convinced of that. For him, there had to be some meticulous way to get out of that situation, and he immediately started putting his mind to work. He told Dream to document all he knew about the prison in a book. They kept hoping both could find something to help them escape. It didn't take long for Technoblade to come up with a plan, and this plan was impossible for someone to carry out alone, but the two of them together could do it. Well, inside that prison, there were ocean guardians that gave them mining fatigue, and that means that each block of obsidian would take just over 24 hours to break by hand, Leo. Why didn't Dream try escaping from the prison earlier? Well, even if he did, an alarm would go off, so clearly Sam would notice and the plan would never work. However, the two of them together managed to find a blind spot. In that cell, there was a block in the corner that didn't have an alarm. While Dream dug their escape route, Technoblade watched the perimeter and warned him if Sam lowered the lava. That way, as soon as they broke the first block, the process should be repeated until they eventually reached the bottom of the prison, swimming toward freedom. Finally, Dream started mining, believing that only then maybe they still had a chance to live once more. Days turned into weeks and weeks into months. Block by block, they felt freedom getting closer and closer. And just like in the famous Alcatraz prison, maybe the mighty Pandora's vault wasn't impossible to escape from either. Hold on, wait.
What's happening to you? What's going on? So, Dream, hand over the revival book.
Or I'll kill Technoblade. Don't do it, Dream. If I give you the revival book...
Kill me. If I
give you the revival book, you can kill Technoblade and me. So where's our backup? I just need to kill you both. I'll reconsider since I'm in a good mood today.
Alright, Technoblade. Listen, you have to convince this guy to send the book. Dream, you absolutely must give him the revival book.
Okay, I'm not done playing games. You know what? Shall we go? Shall we?
Technoblade. He could be extremely funny even in critical moments. However, Quackity reached his breaking point and his mood was not good at all. He recruited and manipulated people just to be fixed by Dream instead of getting the server's most powerful book. That book was all he needed to take control of the Dream Survival multiplayer. He saw the perfect world he envisioned on the horizon, possibly even peace, but Technoblade still stood in his way. After he destroyed Lemanberg, Quackity hated that pig. He punished Technoblade for his crimes against the nation, but even so, he ended up being eliminated. The real criminal had gotten away, but he was left with the scar from his pickaxe on his face. Quackity was blinded by revenge. As much as, up until that moment, he had been building a good plan, we had reached his limit. Now, Quackity was seeking revenge and planned to eliminate Techno, just as before. Quackity will kill Technoblade.
Just like you did, I have a pickaxe, and I'm going to put it through you, Technoblade. No, 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 no!
No way, Technoblade never dies. He was just often imitated. Filza, your best and oldest friend on the server, saved him. In his hands, Filza was holding the book that Technoblade had given him before the visit to Dream. Seeing the book, Technoblade smiled, knowing his plan had succeeded. 3 months had passed since our pig was imprisoned with Dream, leaving Filza devastated without his friend. He finally gathered the courage and decided to read the farewell book that Technoblade had left. When Filza read the first page, he was shocked. He climbed the snowy mountains and entered the Union meeting room. There was still hope for Technoblade, a final plan to save his life. Each member of the Union had left an Ender Pearl, that is, a teleport, behind their chairs. And those pearls never touched the ground. On the contrary, they stayed above, floating on water bubbles. And if the Union needed to urgently gather for a meeting, all they had to do was close the trapdoors so that everyone would be teleported almost instantly. And that's how Filza saw his friend just a click away. The Angels of Quaker say Filza saved himself by closing the trapdoor to stop Technoblade. After shouting out his brother, they both quickly left through a secret tunnel to an item bank. and when the gates finally lowered, Technoblade saw the sunlight after 3 months. From then on, he knew his friend was trapped in that horrible place, likely with Kaker involved. He thought of a way to free his friend from prison. Fortunately, Dream gave him many books on Pandora's vault and he found coordinates in one. To his surprise, that was the exact place where they had spoken for the first time. And after walking through forests and oceans, he just wondered why Dream wanted him to go there or what could be hidden on the side of that mountain. And finally, Technoblade began his climb, his last one.
Alright, this is the part where I end the stream. It's really climactic, isn't it?